of billions of dollars. I mean, it's like a massive tax on all of us. Every time you go to the gasoline pump, every time you turn on a light, every time we use energy of some kind, recognize it's effectively sending money to other places in the world. That money could be spent here instead, either developing our own resources in terms of energy, or in being more efficient in our use of energy, becoming energy independent, energy secure. I think it was Thomas Friedman who said the single most important thing we could do for our foreign policy would be to become energy independent. And finding ways through new technologies. I mean, we all hope for this great technology that allows us to have unlimited sources of energy at limited cost. If we could find such a thing, that would be wonderful for us. It'd be wonderful for China. It'd be wonderful for the planet. By the way, it would also be, if you're concerned, as I am, about the warming of our planet and the pollution of our planet, it'd be good for that too. So there are multiple reasons for America to develop our own energy resources.
But what does that mean practically?
Well, practically, first
drilling
of all,
in the outer continental shelf.
Yeah, it means
building nuclear power plants.
Sure. And by the way, I spent my life in the private sector, and so I know something about pricing and negotiating. I would drill everywhere we think we got good prospects for getting oil. I would intend to drill in Anwar and so forth. I would drill. I wouldn't, however, pump it all out immediately. I would have that huge resource there as a bit of a price buffer for the world. And if the prices get too high, they know we're going to start to pump. If the prices are a little lower, we pull back a bit. And we keep those oil reserves as we need to make sure that we don't run out of oil. The last thing, by the way, we want to do is to run out of oil. 50 years from now, to say to our grandkids, too bad, we used up all the oil, you got none left. We want to make sure we have plenty for coming generations. But having those wells drilled and available and turned on as we need to would be helpful to moderate the prices of the world. So oil is one piece. Natural gas is an enormous source of energy for us. We have massive natural gas resources, in part because of new technology. There's a new horizontal drilling technology which has opened up huge reserves of natural gas. And natural gas can be used in a very clean way to generate electricity. It also can be used for transportation, for trains, for trucks, for major fleets. It could be used for automobiles as well, if we chose to go that way. That's a resource. We ought to be, with the $787 billion stimulus plan, wouldn't you think we would have built a natural gas pipeline system to provide lower cost energy and make ourselves more energy independent? There's, of course, nuclear. Other nations are using nuclear power. We ought to be developing and using more nuclear power. And then there's energy efficiency. We have to create incentives for Americans to care about how much energy we use. You put all that together and we can become energy independent, meaning not that we're not going to buy energy from Canada, meaning that we don't have to buy energy from people who will use it to hold us up and who will use it as a political weapon.
You talked about China when you were speaking about it before in your first remarks. You said that the words I wrote down as you spoke were, they believe their strategy will win.
Yeah.
But in the book, you actually write that what distinguishes China's involvement in the world today is that, quote, it is winning.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know, in what sense do you see China actually winning now? And could it realistically become more powerful than the United States in the near term?
Yeah, the place they're winning right now is in focusing on developing new markets and new products and having those products outcompete our products. And they are in various segments of the consumer market and the industrial markets. They are developing products and processes that are winning, and they're gaining market share on a global basis. They are not winning, however, relative to the United States overall. And our innovative capabilities and our ability to lead the world in new ideas and new technologies continues to propel our economy and to make us the most powerful economy and the largest economy in the world. So they're not there yet. But because of their total size and the advances they're making, their economy will be larger than ours sometime in the next couple of decades. And as that occurs, they'll be able to invest more and more in their military might. They have a military buildup, which is really second to none. They've added 30 submarines in the last 10 years. They built a new under-mountain port for their submarines. They don't look to compete with us all over the world with aircraft carriers, although they're now building their first aircraft carrier. Instead, they want to be able to have the capacity to be the dominant player in their theater in the Pacific. And they're working very hard to get there. They're not a backwater nation anymore. They're a very substantial economy that is succeeding in certain segments of consumer and industrial marketplaces, and they're building a very, very strong military. They do not have to be our enemy or our foe. They can be a partner for stability, but it's essential that we keep up and that we invest both in our military might and our productive and economic and, if you will, educational foundation, so that our innovative lead continues to propel what is a small nation, America, with 300 million, to become every bit as vibrant or more so than a much larger nation with 1.3 billion people.
How far do you want to push this idea that China and the United States can be partners for stability? This is a system, as you describe it in the book, that combines authoritarian repression in the political sphere with essentially economic free enterprise.
Well,
you asked, and it sounded like you didn't really have even for yourself a very good answer to the question: whatever happened to the spirit of Tiananmen Square?
Yeah, and I mentioned in the book as you know, some confusion on my part when I went to China. In my last visit, I went there at the Olympic Games in 2008, and I'd expected, as I met with people, that I'd find a lot of dissatisfaction, and that people quietly would be expressing a great longing for freedom. I didn't find that, and that surprised me. It seemed that there was much more interest in learning how to gather to themselves American-style wealth and free enterprise, and less excitement about American democracy. Now, perhaps it was just that the people who were the dissident voices were shuttled out of town when the visitors were there, and that's entirely possible. And there are a lot of people in jail that can't have their voices spoken and heard. But it was interesting. I make mention of the fact that at the opening ceremonies, for instance, this is just a small anecdote, but at the opening ceremonies, you have tens of thousands of Chinese there, and they introduce Hu Jintao, and it's all cheers, no boos. Can you imagine at Fenway Park introducing a politician and getting anything but a few boos here and there? I mean, that just doesn't happen. And it's like, gosh, and maybe that was just pride of the country, but then...
Did you take that lack of booze to be a genuine reflection of what the Chinese people feel?
I just thought...
Or a reflection of what they know would happen to the person who booed?
Perhaps. But in a big crowd, you can never quite tell who's booing. And then when they announce the teams, when they have the Parade of Nations and the teams come in, they announce Cuba. And there's a huge cheer for Cuba. And a huge cheer for North Korea. And I thought, don't you read the paper? Don't you? The answer is no. All right, the paper they get doesn't have what's in our paper. It is censored. You watch CNN over there, and they black out certain shows and certain comments. That's CNN. Can you imagine what they do to Fox? I mean, so what they're seeing, what they're hearing is not what the world is seeing. And as a result, they have a very warped view, a very biased view about what's happening in the world. And now, what do I ultimately believe? I believe that their strategy, which combines economic freedom with repression and authoritarianism, ultimately can't work. That the two conflict in too great a way. That as people travel the world and are selling products and seeing how the rest of the world lives, that the population of the country will say, we can't live with that. And that's the.
And yet you don't see that happening yet.
Well, we don't have evidence of that happening yet in a significant way in China. I think it will develop. Their leaders do not believe it'll develop. They believe, in fact, no, their model is better, and if they keep people that come off the farms into the cities, they put them to work, they get them incomes, that they'll be happy. And I mean, I know that wouldn't last 5 minutes in this country, but what they have known there, perhaps they can hold it together for a while. I think it's inevitable that their system will fail. They think it's inevitable that ours will, and time will tell. But one thing I do know, and that is if we pursue a course of weakening America, weakening our family structures, weakening our education system, underinvesting in technology, making it less and less possible for enterprises to be productive, putting more and more debt on our balance sheet as they rack up credit card accounts on theirs, loaning to us, that we might find ourselves with a superior strategy having been outmaneuvered.
In 2005, when he was inaugurated the second time, President Bush said in his second inaugural address, "It should be the policy of the United States to seek and support the growth of democratic movements and institutions in every nation and culture with the ultimate goal of ending tyranny in our world." There were a lot of people who thought that was wonderful, and there were a lot of people who thought that was pie in the sky. Where does Mitt Romney come down? Should the promotion of freedom and democracy, the overt promotion of freedom and democracy, be an explicit national interest of the United States? Or do you see that as simply a desirable benefit that will follow if we pursue other policies?